Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another episode of Terror Thursday. Today I'm going to be reviewing the recent film Apartment 7A, which is a prequel to Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. I'm going to have to say Polanski's Rosemary's Baby because there was never a prequel that was written by Ira Levin, so this basically ties to the story, but mostly to the Polanski film. So Apartment 7A is about Terry D'Onofrio, who was a young woman who lived with the Castevets, and the Castevets were neighbors to Rosemary and Guy Woodhouse. They lived in the Bramford, and in the movie Rosemary's Baby, Rosemary meets Terry one day when she's in the laundry room doing her laundry, and Terry says to her that this nice old couple took her in and she was basically living on the streets and she was in a lot of trouble and she would be dead if it wasn't for the Castevets. They're like grandparents to her. And then one day, Rosemary and Guy are walking down the street back from wherever and they find Terry dead in the street. And they turn around and Minnie and Roman Castevets happen to be walking down the street. They encounter Rosemary and Guy, and that's when things start to turn for Rosemary. So this story about Terry starts before she meets the Castevets. She's a young dancer. She's in New York City, and she's trying out for various Broadway musicals, and she's in a Broadway musical, and she falls and breaks her ankle. And guys, if I didn't say this beforehand, there's going to be spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie and want to, you're going to have to just kind of skip this video altogether and come back to it. Or, just suck it on up and, kind of fast forward to some parts to hear just what you want to know about it. Because I'll give you my overall thoughts towards the end. But I can't talk about this film without giving some spoilers. If you've seen Rosemary's Baby, most of this is not really going to be a surprise to you because we all know what happens to Terry. So her ending is already predestined. So a lot of people are saying that this is a pointless sequel because you already know what her fate is. I disagree with that because I think that this does give a little bit more information about the Castevets. I will get to that as I'm going along with this review. Anyway, Terry's on Broadway and she has an accident. She falls and she breaks her ankle. And from that point on, she has a hard time, obviously, getting dance roles. Now, I personally don't know how she was able to dance at all because at some point in the movie, we find out she met the Castevets and gets another role 4 months after the injury, which seems like a really short amount of time, especially in 1965, for her to have that serious of an injury and be able to get up and walk around so quickly afterwards. But walking, let alone dance. And then something does happen where she's given some kind of an ointment to help her ankle. But even before that, she's dancing and she's able to do a whole lot more than what most people would be able to do even today with the type of injury that she did have. And I have to say, it was just hard for me to watch because as someone who has a lot of joint issues with my RA, especially in my ankle, it just really made my stomach do flip-flops. It was very, very hard to watch. So she's basically taking a lot of pain pills and she's auditioning for parts, not getting any parts. And she one day auditions for a show called The Pale Crook. And crook meaning a staff, okay? Not a crook, a robber. It's a musical, and she's auditioning for the musical, and she's asked to perform the same move that caused her ankle injury over and over and over again. And the creator of the musical is there. His name is, I did take notes, Mershon. Mr. Mershon. His first name is here somewhere. I'm not sure where it is, but at any rate, he basically, Alan Mershon, that's his name. And he wants Terry to keep doing this move over and over, and then he wants her to imitate the farm animals that she lived with before she came to New York. And Terry says no, she's not going to humiliate herself. So she decides, after the audition is over and after taking like a handful of pain pills, she decides to follow him home. And oh, just so happens he lives at the Bramford. And of course, we know the Bramford is where Rosemary and Guy move into. And this is also the home of the Castevets, the Trench sisters, Laura Louise, and that whole gang of folks in the coven. So anyhow, she goes into the building, meets the doorman, says that she wants to see Mr. Mershon, and very shortly afterwards, she starts to get very woozy. She's going to pass out. She runs out to the street. She's vomiting. The Castevets are there. They see her. She passes out, and they bring her into their apartment, and she wakes up there. And she doesn't really know what's going on, and they explain to her that she was really sick, looked like she was out of it. They took her in. They gave her some breakfast, and they're talking to her, and of course they seem so kindly. Always watch out for the people who are just unnaturally kindly, because they're the ones that are going to get you in trouble. So anyway, they say that they have an extra apartment that they bought, which is apartment 7A, and she's welcome to use it and live there if she wants, because they don't have any children, and it would be so nice to have somebody in that space, and they feel like they were doing something good, yada, yada, yada. So since Terry had heard earlier, her roommates were talking about how she was a burden and she wasn't pulling her own weight. Obviously, since she wasn't dancing, she wasn't able to contribute anything toward the rent, toward food, whatever. She agrees to do it. So she packs all of her things and she moves in with the Castevets. And the Castevets arrange for her very shortly after moving in to have dinner with Alan Mershon. During this dinner, he explains that the Pale Crook is a tribute to Adrian Marcato. And if you've seen Rosemary's Baby, you know Adrian Marcato is the father of Stephen Marcato, also known as Roman Castevets, okay? Rosemary's Baby, Hutch told her that Roman Castevets was an anagram, and she figures out that this was an anagram. And Adrian Marcato was a very famous witch practitioner of black magic. And it's kind of a little bit bothersome that they equate just being a witch with a satanic cult, because there's a lot of different types of witchcraft and it doesn't really relate to Satanism. So let's get back on with the movie. I mean, they're two different things. If someone practices Wicca, sometimes people say, oh, well, they're a witch and they're up to no good. And really, it's just a nature-based thing. It's not anything that's evil. People could choose to practice evil, but most of those people don't. It's just a pagan religion that existed before Christianity, and they see God in many things. However, what Castevets was doing was not anything like that. He was an evil person. We all know that because we know what they were up to. So Rosemary's living there, and she goes to this dinner, and she wakes up. Well, like Rosemary, she gets to be in a trance, finds out that there's this secret room downstairs where basically she is in a very compromising position with the cult all around her. Roman Castevet, spoiler, Roman is at the foot of her table, wherever altar where they have her laying, and he becomes the one who impregnates her. I think we find out that he was the one later on when Terry starts to remember a little bit more, but in this sequence, which is kind of a part dream sequence, the satanic figure that impregnates Terry is this sparkly demon. I mean, the sparkles kind of harken back to Twilight for me. I mean, I thought that was kind of weird. It wasn't so much creepy as like, do we need a Swarovski encrusted, stressed out demon? I don't think so. I mean, you know, maybe they didn't want it to look as off-putting, but it was pretty off-putting. Let's put it that way. So we find out that there's all of the people in the building, and they're the people that you've seen before in Rosemary's Baby. As I've said, Dr. Saperstein is there. We know the obstetrician, Dr. Saperstein, and of course, Terry makes a comment during a party that she hopes not to need his services, but of course, lo and behold, she's going to need Saperstein services kind of pretty soon. So anyway, things progress. She does wind up getting a role, of course, in Marchand's play. She realizes that he took advantage of her and, you know, just kind of thinks it's a little bit weird, but it being 1965, she takes the part in the play, doesn't really say much about it, except she was a little bit offended, but, you know, kind of was no biggie. So one of the other neighbors, Mrs. Gardenia, get back to her in a minute, happens to be at Minnie's apartment one day, and she makes some kind of an herbal solution for Terry to use on her ankle. And by the next morning, lo and behold, she is just healed. And she's able to dance much better. And some misfortune happens to the person who was the lead in the show, and Terry winds up having to fill her shoes. And again, this is a play about Adrian Marcato, supposedly. And fun fact, there was a play called The Black Crook, and it was based on a Faustian deal. Came out in 1866, and it's known to be, or considered to be, the first actual Broadway musical. But in the movie, there's supposedly a legend that this White Crook was the first Broadway musical. So they did pull some information from reality, but we of course know that Adrian Marcato is not a real person. It's not the same play, but it's kind of paralleling on some facts and getting the information from some facts. So let me get back to the story. So anyway, just like Guy's coworker did in Rosemary's Baby, the lead in this show has a misfortune where she's not able to perform, and Terry winds up getting the lead in this show. And it's this really weird production that, I don't know, kind of looks like old pictures of Aleister Crowley that I've seen, where there's, you know, kind of this Egyptian-based makeup. I'm not really sure, honestly, what was going on in this particular dance, but there's quite a few dance scenes in the movie. The rape scene, can I say that? Probably I can't. Okay, the assault that Rosemary goes through, there's a dance sequence that leads up to that. You know, there's several dance sequences that kind of reminded me of something that you would see in a David Lynch movie, but I don't know. I'm not really sure that it added so much to the story. I didn't really need to know all of that. It kind of, for me, broke the mood a little bit. And then Terry starts to suspect that there are some weird things that are going on, because she finds a shoe in her apartment that belonged to a dancer. And long story short, she eventually puts some things together. She figures out what's going on. When she finds out that she's pregnant and doesn't want to keep the baby, the Cassavetes offer for her to raise the baby for her, and she agrees to it. And as Terry kind of pulls away more and more and kind of isn't really sure she wants to go through with things, the Cassavetes start to get a little bit antsy, and Terry starts to put things together. And at one point, she has an encounter with a nun, and she also has an encounter with Mrs. Gardenia. And in Rosemary's Baby, if you recall, the Woodhouses move into the apartment that used to be owned by Mrs. Gardenia. And Rosemary finds a piece of a letter that says, "I cannot continue this." And we see Mrs. Gardenia writing this letter in her apartment. And we do know that she was into herbs and whatnot because there were a lot of herbs in the Woodhouse apartment. So there definitely were a lot of ties. Overall, I mean, we know what happens once this first attempt didn't go the way they wanted it to. They had to find a substitute, and they did very quickly thereafter. There is a scene where Terry's in the basement and Rosemary is there with her, but they never interact like they do in the movie. And the movie does conclude with Guy and Rosemary meeting the Castevets and standing there looking at Terry's body. So we kind of know, of course, what happens later. So it was very atmospheric. I really enjoyed the sets. I thought the sets were excellent. Diane Wiest was fabulous as Minnie Castevets. She was absolutely fabulous. I don't remember who the actor was that played Roland, but he was good as well. Really had a lot of feel of the first film if it weren't for all the dancing and sparkly things. So take that out. It would have been a lot better if they had have just kind of did the story as the story goes. I would have liked a little bit more information about how the cult started and what exactly their intentions, besides birthing the Antichrist, what did they expect was going to happen afterwards. It would have been interesting to know that, but they didn't really explore it so much in the movie. So I'm not really sure, how they would have gone about doing that, but I would have enjoyed a deeper history on the Bramford and who lived there and how the cult came to be. So who knows, maybe they're going to be making a prequel to the prequel in the future, which would be kind of odd, but I mean, I'd be there for it. Was it necessary? No. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I enjoyed going back and I enjoyed seeing what actually happened, what their intentions were for Terry and how she wound up getting into the position that she was in and why suddenly she decided to jump out a window. I mean, we could assume, but I do think that it was, just another little piece of the story and another good character to explore. So that definitely was something that I enjoyed. But again, the acting was just top notch. The film flowed really well. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I think that that's a little bit generous because I think that there definitely were some weaknesses, but when you're making a prequel, there's already weaknesses built in if you are starting with a character whose fate you already know. But sometimes it can be done well, like Better Call Saul, of course, was a prequel to Breaking Bad, and I think even surpassed Breaking Bad. It would be very, very hard to surpass the original Rosemary's Baby. But I definitely think that this held up to the original in terms of the story and in terms of the way the characters were presented. So if you've seen the film, if you have any insights, if you have any comments that you want to make, please leave them in the description box below. Head over and watch Yota because Yota is reviewing this as well. And I think, not sure if Winnie is. I don't know if Winnie is in with us this week. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, this was a gift from Yota, and it is none other than Jason, or no, Michael Myers. Michael Myers. This is Michael. Oh no, is this? No, it's Jason. I gotta admit, sometimes, guys, I have a hard time knowing who's who. This is Jason. Michael Myers wears the Captain Kirk mask. So yeah, Jason. Sorry, Yota, I confuse my horror boyfriends. Anyway, head over, see what she says, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I will see you on Saturday for a regularly scheduled luxury video. Bye.